My name is Josephine Calloway, though everyone who loves me calls me Josie. I am 32 years old. And 20 years ago, my parents left me standing alone at a gas station off Route 411 outside Loudon, Tennessee. Because I was 12, and I had told the truth in front of the wrong people. I slept behind a propane cage that night, wrapped in my brother's Letterman jacket, counting headlights and praying one pair would turn around. None did. I did not speak to my parents again for 20 years. Then, this past spring, a cream-colored envelope arrived at my apartment in Nashville. Inside was my brother's wedding invitation. And tucked behind it, a single handwritten line from my mother that made my coffee cup rattle against the saucer. What none of them knew when they mailed that envelope was what I would learn in the 2 weeks before the wedding. And what I would do when my father stood up with a glass of champagne in front of 240 guests. My family still has not recovered from it. If you've ever sat quietly for years while someone else rewrote your story for you, stay with me, because this one has an ending you'll want to see. The day the envelope came, I had just finished a 13-hour shift in the pediatric emergency room at Riverside Children's Hospital. My last patient was a 7-year-old named Poppy with a hairline fracture in her wrist. She held still for the X-ray like a little soldier, then looked up and asked the question I hear more than people would guess. Is my mom going to be mad at me? I crouched to her eye level. No. Sweetheart. Getting hurt is never something you did wrong. I have said that sentence to other people's children for 8 years. And every time, some part of me is saying it to a 12-year-old girl standing under fluorescent lights in a parking lot. I drove home, dropped my badge in the bowl by the door, and smelled garlic on the stove. Marcus, my partner, teaches high school biology and cooks like he's apologizing to every vegetable he touches. He nodded at the counter. Something fancy came for you. The envelope sat on top of the electric bill like it owned the place. Heavy cream cardstock. My name in looping calligraphy. In the corner, a postmark I hadn't seen in almost a year, since the last of my grandmother's estate papers cleared. Cedar Hollow, Tennessee. I held it the way you hold something that might still go off. Inside was a beautiful invitation. Weston Calloway and Brooke Sutton, requesting my presence at their wedding at Grace Baptist Church. Reception to follow at Sutton Family Vineyard. My brother was getting married. Into the wealthiest family in the county. And behind the RSVP card, a scrap of notebook paper folded in quarters. My mother's slanted cursive, the same hand that used to sign my permission slips. All is forgiven. Josie. Come home. Mom and Dad. I laughed. One short, ugly laugh. Then my hand started shaking and wouldn't stop. Marcus read it over my shoulder. Forgiven, he said slowly. Josie, what exactly do they think they're forgiving you for? That's the real question. 20 years of silence. And the message my parents finally sent was a pardon. Not an apology. Not one question about how I'd survived. Ah, pardon. From the two people who left a 12-year-old at a gas station and drove 80 miles home to sleep in their own beds. So let me start from the beginning. Cedar Hollow is the kind of small town where the church bulletin is the newspaper, and the newspaper is the church bulletin. We lived on Dogwood Lane, in a white house with black shutters and the prettiest porch on the block. My father, Walt, worked the floor at a machine parts plant and fixed trucks on weekends, saving for a shop of his own. He was a deacon at Grace Baptist. My mother, Linda, ran the church fellowship. My brother, Weston, was 16 that year. A pitcher with a fastball that made grown men talk like poets. And then there was me, 12. Glasses. The one who asked too many questions. My mother had one answer for questions like that, delivered with a look sharp enough to press a shirt. We do not discuss family business outside these walls. That was the first commandment of Dogwood Lane. Not the lying, the telling. You could be broke, furious, falling apart. And it was fine as long as the porch stayed painted. The spring I turned 12. The plant cut a third of its floor staff. And my father's name was on the list. I know now it broke something in him. Back then I just noticed his mouth got thinner. My mother's did too. And one night I came downstairs for water and stopped on the stairs because my parents sat at the kitchen table with a shoebox of overdue bills. And my father's voice was a kind of quiet I'd never heard. The new truck payment was 2 months behind. That Sunday we sat in the fourth pew like always. And my father slid the tithe envelope into the plate, smooth as a card trick. 3 weeks later, the truth fell out of my mouth in a set of bleachers full of strangers. And it cost me my childhood. The regional championship was 200 miles away, in a town called Marion. Weston pitched like the town had ordered him to 7 innings. Untouchable. Afterward, a neighbor announced the whole team was celebrating at a steakhouse. Her treat. Everyone welcome. She looked right at my mother. My mother looked at my father. And I, 12 years old, raised to answer adults honestly, filled the silence with the plain truth. Dad says we can't afford restaurants until the truck's paid off. That was the whole crime. The silence that followed had a texture to it. My mother laughed with all the bones taken out of it and steered me to the truck with her nails in my shoulder. My father said nothing. We pulled out before they even handed out the trophy. The drive home was 200 miles. I only made it 120 of them. Used past dusk. My father pulled into a gas station outside a crossroads town called Loudon. 80 miles left to home. I know that number the way other people know their birthdays. He parked at the far pump and told me to get out and stretch my legs. I thought it was a bathroom stop. I stood under the lights. The pump clicked back into its cradle. The truck rolled forward. And my father's window came down halfway. You want to run your mouth like a grown woman, grow up and find your own way home. The window went up. Gravel popped. I watched the taillights get small. Then, gone. Something dark flew from the back window and landed on the shoulder Weston's Letterman jacket. Still warm. Callaway stitched across the back. I put it on. It hung past my knees. I stood under those lights wearing my brother's name and waited for a truck that never came back. There was a payphone by the ice cooler. I dialed the operator and asked for a collect call. It rang 3 times. Then my father's voice. Close and impossible. The operator asked if he'd accept the charges. No, he said. She has to learn. Click. Dead dial tone. I didn't flag down a stranger's car even at 12. Some part of me knew what kind of story that becomes. Instead, I found a gap behind the propane cage on the east wall. Out of the wind. With a clean view of the pumps. I sat on flattened cardboard in my brother's jacket and counted 18 wheelers to stay awake. 43 of them. Before the sky started to lighten. At 6 a.m, a woman in a red vest named Dot found me. Bought me chocolate milk and an egg biscuit. And called the sheriff. By that afternoon, my parents had already given their version. We stopped for gas. Josie wandered off. We figured she'd hitched a ride to her grandmother's, a misunderstanding. A dramatic child. A dark highway. The deputy believed it. Because my father was a deacon who'd fixed his transmission for cost. But a caseworker opened a file anyway. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, Ruth Beaumont, drove down from Knoxville that same afternoon. 61 years old. Doing 80 in a Buick. One look at me in a borrowed blanket. And her face closed like a ledger. That winter, my parents signed guardianship over to her. No trial. No headlines. Just a lawyer's office on a Tuesday. My parents signing their daughter over like a car title. Because fighting it meant an investigation. And an investigation meant the town would finally hear something. My mother cried at that table. My father exhaled long and slow. And his shoulders came down. I've seen relief on 1,000 faces in my ER. He was relieved. My grandmother's house in Knoxville smelled like coffee and lemon oil. Her first night's rule. Over grilled cheese. The truth is not a sin in this kitchen. Nobody leaves this table hungry or unheard. I wasn't an easy kid after that. I checked the locks twice a night and kept a packed duffel bag in my closet until I was 15. She never once made me unpack it. Just washed what was inside and folded it back. But that table held. I graduated second in my class. Put myself through nursing school. And when I pinned on my badge at Riverside, she sat in the front row and whistled through her fingers. For 20 years. She was my whole family. She passed this January. At 79. Reading glasses still on an open crossword. At her funeral, my parents stood on the other side of the aisle. And we didn't speak. I still carry a lunchbox note she once wrote me. Folded in my wallet, chin up. Tell the truth. Come home. The night the invitation came, Marcus found me at 2 a.m. at the kitchen table. My thumbnail moving over my mother's cursive like I could sand it off the page. I gave him the shape of it gas station. 12 years old. Grandmother. Never went back, sanded smooth. Corners knocked off. You know, he finally said, of everyone I've ever met, you're the best at being okay. He didn't mean it as a compliment. My brother called 4 days later. Hey, Joe. It's me. He talked fast. The way people do when they've rehearsed the invitation was a lot. He was sorry. And then, gently, he tried to reassure me. I know things were rough back then. Mom always told us you refused to come home. That Nana let you make that call. And it broke her heart. I stood there and understood. All at once, my silence had never been neutral. Their story had simply grown to fill the empty field. He wasn't lying to me. He was repeating what he'd been fed his whole life. Weston, I said. Did you know they put a note in my invitation? I read it to him. Long silence. That's Mom's handwriting, he said finally. Then I asked the question I'd never asked a living Calloway. What do you remember about the gas station? I remember Dad saying we'd circle back. He said slowly. He said you needed a scare. 15 minutes. Then we were just driving. And Mom kept saying you'd probably hidden there to punish everybody. That you always landed on your feet. His sentences slowed. Like a man testing stairs in the dark. You were 12. I was 16. With a license. I could have. He stopped there. I didn't finish it for him. I told him I'd think about the wedding. But there was somewhere I needed to stand first. That Saturday I drove 60 miles up Route 411 with the radio off. The station outside Loudon is still there, new canopy. Same bones underneath. I parked where the truck had idled 20 years earlier and walked the east wall. The propane cage is newer, but it lives in the same corner. And the gap behind it is still exactly the width of a skinny kid. I stood there in my grown woman's coat and didn't fall apart. Which surprised me. Inside, the woman at the register was Dot. Still there. Mornings only. 31 years behind that counter. My throat closed. Standing right there. I opened my phone and answered the RSVP. Attending. One guest. Because that gas station was where they'd left me. And it was also going to be the place I decided to come back from. On my own terms. Dot poured 2 coffees without asking. I always wondered if anybody told you, she said. About the truck. My stomach dropped. Night you were out there. Hollis worked the overnight. Around 1 a.m. A pickup came through slow, didn't gas up. Didn't park. Just rolled the length of the lot and got back on the highway. Headed east. Woman in the passenger seat. Looking hard out the window. He raised a hand. Nobody waved back. I did arithmetic I didn't want to do. A truck. East. toward Cedar Hollow. 1 in the morning. 7 hours after they'd left me. 5 hours after my collect call was refused. For 20 years I'd survived on the story that they never came back at all. It turned out that was the merciful version. Somebody had driven 80 miles back in the dark, rolled slowly past the pumps while I slept 20 feet away, and then gone home without opening a door. I carried those questions to a wedding. That night I told Marcus everything. Hole the window, the payphone, the click, the count of 43 trucks, and now the truck at 1 in the morning. He listened without flinching, then asked one question. What do you want out of that room? Josie, not are you okay? Not do you want me to hate them? I opened my laptop and typed a toast anyway. 2 paragraphs. Kind. Beige. Bulletproof. Congratulations to Weston and Brooke. Family is complicated. Love wins. I fully intended to read that version. My mother called that Thursday. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. Sweeter. She said the wedding would be beautiful, that the Suttons had done so much with the vineyard. And then, with a small laugh, got to the point. I just hope we can keep things pleasant. You were always so dramatic about the past. Let's not relitigate ancient history. I asked what exactly she thought I might relitigate. Nothing. Honey, it's just they've asked about you. Our daughter. The nurse. They're so pleased the whole family will finally be together. There it was. A gap in the family photo raises questions. And questions were the one thing our porch was built to prevent. I wasn't being welcomed home. I was being cast. See you in October. Mom, I said. Before she hung up, we don't discuss family business. Honey, I almost canceled twice. The Sunday before the wedding, I drove to my grandmother's grave instead and told her everything. Then I let myself into her half-packed house, looking for a tablecloth, and found a sealed bag in the cedar chest. Labeled in her block capitals, Josie's. 20 years old. Keep. Inside was Weston's jacket. Washed and folded for 2 decades. It still fit over my coat. I understood. Finally, why she'd kept it. It was the only thing that had ever come out of that truck for me. One person, 16, and outvoted, had thrown me his own warmth on the way out the door. Evidence that someone had loved me. Even clumsily. Even out a window. Cedar Hollow. 20 years later. Wears the same outfit, new gas station. Same banner over Main Street. The same marquee outside Grace Baptist Love Bears All Things. At the rehearsal dinner, my mother saw me first and crossed the room. Arms wide. Our Josie. The nurse. I stood in that hug like a coat rack, counting the faces watching us, which was the entire point of the hug. My father shook my hand like he was closing on a used car. Good you came. Somewhere between the barbecue and the cake. Mr. Sutton kindly asked how it felt to have the whole family together. My father folded his hands. Kids scatter. Roots hold. Callaways always find their way back. My mother picked it up like a rehearsed duet. Josie went through a phase. She stayed with my mother a while. Up in Knoxville. But family is family. My entire life after 12. Folded down to the size of a napkin, I found my mother alone in the kitchen afterward. Boxing leftover cake. Did you come back that night? She didn't ask which night. That told me everything. Finally, her shoulders came down an inch. I made him turn the truck around. She said quietly. I couldn't sleep. We came through that lot around 1. And you weren't under the lights. I looked. Josie. I looked hard. And your father said, if she sees us, rescue her. The lesson dies. He said you'd found somewhere warm. And we went home. She looked up, wet-eyed, believing she was offering me a gift. I wrote the note. Sweetheart, Your father doesn't apologize. Not once in 59 years. All is forgiven, that's the closest thing you'll get. My father was outside smoking by his truck. You know what my daddy did, he said. Unprompted. County fair. I was 10. Mouthed off in front of the feed dealer. He put me by the stock pens and walked off. Came back at dark. I never mouthed off in front of another man again. He said it like a trophy. His hands were shaking slightly at the edges, the way a body remembers what the mouth won't admit. A 10-year-old boy. Watching the crowd all day for a hat that never came. Who spent his whole life polishing the wound into a lesson. You turned out strong. That's mine. Josie. You're welcome. He walked inside. I stood in the gravel and finally let go of the apology I'd been waiting 20 years for. It had never been coming. It had never existed. The night before the wedding. Weston knocked on my motel door, carrying 2 root beers. He saw the jacket draped over the chair and went still. You kept this, I told him everything. In the flat voice I use for handoff reports. Because it's the only container strong enough. When I got to the payphone, he made a sound like he'd been struck. I heard it. He said. That night the phone rang once. Late. Dad was standing in the kitchen in the dark. I heard him say no. Just no. My 36-year-old brother put his face in his hands and said the truest thing anyone in my family has ever told me. I told myself you were okay because Nana came. I needed you to be okay so I didn't have to know what I knew. Then he looked up. Tomorrow. Will you say a few words as my family? The wedding was genuinely beautiful, October light through old glass. Brooke in her grandmother's lace. Weston crying before she was halfway down the aisle. Nothing that happened after was aimed at them. At the reception. Under string lights in a barn. My father stood and tapped his glass. He thanked the Suttons. Praised Weston. Then turned to me. Every family weathers storms. Our daughter Josie drifted from us for a while. We won't dwell on old weather tonight. Because tonight, I can stand here and say it plain, my family is whole again. All is forgiven. 240 glasses rose. My mother dabbed her eyes on cue. And 1 seat down. My brother was not clapping. Weston stood, buttoned his jacket, and carried the microphone to me. Before we cut the cake, my sister came a long way tonight. Would you say a few words, as my family? My mother's hand closed around my wrist under the tablecloth. Gentle. A warning dressed as affection. I stood, took the microphone, and set the folded safe toast on the table in front of my father, where he could watch me choose not to read it. My name is Josephine Calloway. I said. Level. Unhurried. 20 years ago. At a gas station, on Route 411. My father told me to get out of the truck. I was 12. I'd told another mother we couldn't afford a team dinner. He said, you want to run your mouth like a grown woman. Then grow up and find your own way home. And my family drove away. No forks moving. Just the string lights humming. I called home collect that night. The call was refused. I slept behind a propane cage in my brother's jacket. He threw it out the window as they left. And it was the only warmth my family offered me. In the morning, a stranger named Dot found me. Bought me chocolate milk. And called the sheriff. My grandmother drove down and gave me a kitchen, where the truth was never a sin. My parents signed guardianship over that winter. And tonight. They've finally forgiven me. I looked at my father. Gone the color of unpainted fence. Dad, I did what you told me. I grew up. I found my own way home. It's a 1-bedroom in Nashville. With a man who's never once left me anywhere. I raised my glass to the couple. Weston. Brooke, may your children grow up knowing the truth is never a sin in their kitchen. And may they never have to be brave at a gas station. I drank. Nobody breathed. My father shot up so fast his chair cracked the floor. That is enough. We do not tell, and he stopped. mid-sentence. Because some part of him heard what the end of it would confess in front of 240 people. The room finished it in silence. We don't tell family business. He wasn't denying a word I'd said. He was objecting to the telling. Brooke crossed the floor first and wrapped her arms around me. "Thank you," she said. "Now I know what I married into. And what I'll do differently." Weston was next, crying openly. I set the microphone down beside the toast I never read, kissed my new sister-in-law, and walked out of that barn spine straight. Exactly the way you leave a room you're finally done auditioning for. My mother caught me in the gravel lot. "You've killed this family. 36 years I've held this together. And you walked in and killed it in 5 minutes." I felt around for the anger and found only clarity. Cool and complete. Like a fever finally breaking. "No. Mum. This family died at a gas station 20 years ago. I'm just the one who reported it." Marcus and I drove south in silence. Past the 80-mile mark, I said it out loud to the windshield. Because 80 miles was once the exact distance between me and everyone who was supposed to love me. "You okay?" he asked. I checked. Honestly. Like a pulse. Yes. For the first time in 20 years. It wasn't a performance. The weeks after weren't tidy. One aunt left a voicemail saying I'd ruined a wedding and that my grandmother would be ashamed of me, which told me only that she'd never eaten at that woman's table. 2 cousins texted the opposite, "I believe you." My parents never called. No reckoning. No apology. Just a new version drifting through the family grapevine. Josie's always been troubled. She got overwrought at the reception. We're praying for her. The porch. Repainting itself right on schedule, but one gray Tuesday. Standing at my own mailbox, I noticed my stomach was quiet. 20 years of bracing for every formal-looking envelope. And the dread had simply packed up and left. Because the thing I'd braced against had finally happened out loud. And I was still standing. Brooke sent a card from the honeymoon. "You gave us a true beginning. Most people only get the pretty kind." Weston calls every Sunday now. A padded envelope arrived from Loudon, a postcard of a gas station at sunset. No message. Just a signature. It's framed by my kitchen window now, where the morning light hits it at 6. Thanksgiving was at my apartment. 4 chairs. 1 slightly burnt turkey. 0 performances. Weston opened my fridge looking for cranberry sauce and went still. Then started laughing. Because on the top shelf sat a carton of chocolate milk. Every week. I told him, "Grocery store. Can't explain it." He set it back gently. Like a relic, the jacket lives folded on my bookshelf now. Between nursing textbooks and my grandmother's crossword dictionaries. Gold letters facing out. Calloway. My name too. After all, I paid enough for it. Near the end of that night, Weston raised his glass. "When we have kids," he said, looking at me, "they're going to know their aunt first, before any other version of anything, and they're going to get the whole story. In their own kitchen, under the table." Brooke's hand covered his. Mine was steady, because here is what 20 years and 80 miles finally taught me. Home was never the house I was ordered to find my way back to. Home is the table where the truth finally gets to sit down and eat. That's my story. 1 gas station. 20 years of silence. 1 handwritten line in a wedding invitation. And 1 toast my family never saw coming. If someone has ever rewritten a story that you were the one who paid for, maybe it's time to take it back. Gently, calmly, and completely out loud.